So welcome once again to Applying Systems Thinking to Navigate Organizational Constraints event hosted by the SI Design Hub. This event is going to be about a case study presentation of an end-to-end IT product offering project brought to us by Daniel Irala from Nestlé IT Global. The session explores, the purpose of the session is to explore how systems thinking can be practically applied within complex corporate environments, even when facing time constraints, political sensitivities, and organizational resistance. The goal is to give practitioners permission and practical guidance to start embedding systems thinking in their work, strategically adapting these frameworks to their context rather than following textbooks perfectly. And really grateful to Daniel for bringing us this case study where I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of learnings together. A little bit about Daniel. He is a senior design researcher, a research specialist at Nestlé IT Global. He's joining us from Barcelona, and he specializes in blending systems thinking with behavioral design to lead global transformation initiatives. He is also the host of the Behave and Design podcast. You could connect with Daniel by clicking here on this button. I'm going to quickly share the link to the Miro or his LinkedIn details very soon in the chat box. And a little bit about Design Hub. We are 3 co-team members, Giselle, myself, and Joss. Giselle is joining from Brazil. She's systems thinker and design thinker. And I am Roma Patadia joining from Bangalore. I am working as program manager currently at the SI Network, and Joss Colchester, he's joining us from Barcelona. He is the founder of the SI Network and works as ecosystem builder with the network. The agenda is quite straightforward. We'll have introduction, and then Daniel will present the case study for about 30 minutes. Towards the end, we'll have question answers, and then we will wrap up. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to type them in the chat box, and we will pick them up towards the end. With this, I would like to invite Daniel to take over and take us through the journey of his case study.
Thank you so much, Roma. Thank you just for having me today. Let me share my screen. You see the slides, right? Perfect. This is the first time that I'm presenting a project that we deliver internally to the public. So as you may understand and you're fully aware, there are some political and sensitive data that we are not allowed to share. So I had to adapt and to present insights or my experience and my learnings in a way that are quite compliant with the way of we share data externally. So before moving in, I want to start with a moment that changed how I see my own work. About a year ago, if we look back, I was looking at service results, thousands of responses from people across the organization about their experience with internal IT Nestlé services. And most of the time, these findings were clear. People were frustrated and they didn't trust the tools. And in some cases, they built entire shadow systems because the official channels felt too slow or maybe, too rigid or disconnected from reality. This is something that is called shadow IT, that maybe some of you working in IT and these organizations sounds familiar, the outsourcing of projects and products. And the thing is, what we got in our brief was that the problem was the low usage of IT product catalog. That is the platform that most of the market use when they go through to request a product within Nestlé. That was they see on the surface, but underneath there were structural incentives rewarding speed over quality or mental models about what IT is supposed to do versus what markets actually needed. That was the key moment that I brought systemic design into this project. So before moving to the context, let's reintroduce myself as Roma has shared. But here I want to say that my client is Nestlé. I'm working in Nestlé IT. I'm not working in the customer experience. Mostly my focus is employee experiences. Um, it's not the same as we are facing the customer. So we are working with limited resources and we need to measure productivity. Um, the processes are quite sometimes abstract from the market level. Something additional to the presentation at the beginning, if I had to describe what I do in one line, I would be this, like I make meaning out of chaos because I believe clarity is a form of kindness, and especially inside these complex organizations where people are overwhelmed, where the signal gets lost in the noise, and where someone needs to sit with the mess long enough, right? Um, that's the work I really care about. So let's share how it looks my ways of working. So most of the time, running interviews, mapping journeys, personas, usability testing, we deliver. But something was missing that ways of working. I will do rigorous research and surface real pain points, present findings that were clear, and then the same problems will come back all the time. And not because the findings were wrong, but because we were mapping the symptoms and the things producing those symptoms lived in a layer I wasn't reaching. It could be the structural layer, the political layer, even the behavioral layer. Something that I realized is that I wasn't missing the data. What I was missing was the depth. So you see this part of the story, you made systems thinking, like systems thinking found me. Um, I felt that it was a need and a sense that I was mapping the surface while the systems underneath kept hidden, right? Um, Systems thinking gave me a way to reach those deeper layers, to understand those, to understand interconnections, and see what are the different causes that can influence that problem, making the things that are invisible visible. And that's really what this talk is about. But now, when you bring systems thinking in an organization, you probably have experienced this type of walls, right? Like coming from stakeholders, from the C-level that say that this is too abstract, or we don't have the time for this, or can you just give us recommendations? I've hit every one of those walls and I'm still hitting those walls. I mean, I think it's something that uh, it's part of our day-to-day. It's part of being resilient. So I learned something from hitting all those walls. And every time that I did, I had to make a choice. Either wait for the perfect conditions to apply the method properly or adapt it to the reality I was actually working in. And for a long time, that felt like a failure to me, like I was doing it wrong until I realized that you won't follow the textbook perfectly, and that's okay Because at the end of the day, what matters is knowing how to adapt frameworks to your context and having the confidence to start even when the conditions aren't ideal. So now that we have this sort of introduction, I will share what we covered today. We will see the project is on the end-to-end IT product offering initiative. Then we have the approach, how we broke the systems lens into a context that wasn't asking for one, and map the different layers of the problem. And finally, as you are fully aware of the learnings and about the method and about myself as a practitioner. So hope you are ready. I'm super excited to share these different aspects of the project. So let's dive in. The project, the M2N IT product offering is, in simple terms, is that my organization was trying to understand and redesign how internal IT services are offered to the business, how people discover them, request them, use them, and get support for them. So those requests are coming from the market. They need to go through different stakeholders and then reach to global level. You see, it seems like a something linear, but in reality was something more complex. Um, our work in a hypothetical case that we didn't have applied systems thinking, we will have mapped the journey, find the pain points, design improvement, this classic service design territory. But um, the brief didn't say that there were layers of intermediaries, like each with their own incentives, with their own frustrations, with a fragmentation of the information and their own workarounds. It didn't say that the trust between the business side and the IT side had been eroding for years, and that the IT product catalog was so disconnected from reality that people had stopped using it. So we have the brief said improve the product offering catalog, and then the reality that says the system is producing dysfunction at every level. So tell me, what do you do? What do you do when you see these two type of uh, gaps, of this gap between what you have on what you and what it exists? So this is the moment I want you to sit with, because I think most of us have been in this situation, right? You get a brief that frames the problem as a journey or as a touch point, as a flow, as a something that it's supposed to be linear. And when you start researching, you realize the problem isn't in the flow, it's in the ecosystem around it. So what do you do when the brief doesn't reflect the real problem? That's the question I had to answer um, to the stakeholders and leadership. And honestly, the first thing I did was panic a little until that situation. So that's another learning that I had on when I apply systems thinking in a large organization. Nobody is waiting for you to bring systems thinking or other methodology. There is no organizational appetite for someone to work in a project and say, hey, we need to think about this systematically. Because at the end of the day, people have deadlines, they have deliverables, and they want outputs and quick wins. So I didn't lead with the language because that would have been the fastest way to lose the room on my opinion. So instead, um, what I did was to lead with evidence. And you can say, okay, evidence, that means the research, right? Exactly. But I like to do this type of co-creation with them. So I like to get this transcript from the interviews, like, and then show them the patterns, the same frustrations, and the difference between the different roles, the different geographies, the different functions, and they have similar SEMA workarounds and the same broken feedback loops. So I started showing this information to them, and I started to ask them to say, like, look, this person in market A is describing the same problem as this person in market B, but they've never spoken to each other. Why is that? What's producing this pattern? So, and that question of what's producing this is the door into systems thinking. And you don't need to call it systems thinking. You just need to get people curious about causes and not just symptoms. That's the main goal and the main purpose of bringing this systems thinking on this mindset into the organization. But of course, always there is a but. um, was it welcome? Well, it was a mixed feeling, you know, like you have the promoters, like some stakeholders lean immediately and they feel in the same frustration. They empathize with the problem, with the findings, with the mapping, but others were more resistant. And not because they disagree, but because systemic framing felt slow. It feels for them like it delays the recommendations. And in organization with quarterly rhythms, it can sound like not deliver anything on time. So I had to find a way to balance, simplify enough to engage, show the depth without drawing people in complexity, and make it feel practical and not too academic or theoretical. And this is something I want to name directly. And the hardest skill in applied system thinking is not the thinking itself. It's the translation. It's taking the systemic insight and make it legible to someone who thinks in terms of roadmaps and OKRs, or maybe they have a, well, maybe no, they have a low maturity level in this approach. They know nothing. So imagine bring them these feedback loops with thousands of iterations, or sorry, of connections. So for that, I will share a specific tactic that helped. Um, Instead of presenting a full systems map, which will have overwhelmed people, I framed the analysis as 3 layers. And I believe that you are fully familiar with the iceberg model, right? And this framework draws a classic system thinking model, and the layers are the layers of abstraction of Donella Meadows and the others. But what I did was to adapt it to the specific context and the specific data. So what we'll see now are the 3 different layers. The layer 1 is what we see. These are the surface level symptoms, the complaints, the workarounds, the visible frustrations. And in this case will be the outsourcing of IT service and not accessing to official ones. As a result, producing this shadow IT behavior. Then we have the how is structure. These are the pattern, processes, and incentives underneath their symptoms. And in our case, this will be the fragmented governance across regions or these misaligned role definitions that we found out. Also, we found out some feedback loops that didn't close and didn't reach to any point during that process. And last but not least, we have what we believe. These are the mental models, right? The assumptions and spoken rules. And in our case, I believe that IT is a cost center, not a partner, or an assumption that standardization means control from market perspective and not enablement. So we understood that there is a narrative that the business doesn't understand technology versus IT doesn't understand markets. We identify two different like this, two siblings like fighting each other against each other. So also something interesting of that when we present this insight, like some aspects of the third layers are like the elephant in the room. Everyone knows and everyone is fully aware of, but they don't connect it to each of the insights. So how do we identify these layers? Of course, through research, combining in-depth interviews and analysis of service data, and we spoke to people with different roles across multiple markets, and this method was iterative. I didn't go into interviews with a system map and try to validate or to map those. I went with open questions and listened to patterns. I listened for the gap between what people say the process was and what they describe actually happening. And I listened for the emotional register where they get frustrated or resigned or animated. Those moments were signals that can lead to these mental models. And now it sounds like there is no constraints at all, but there are, and quite a lot of constraints that you don't are conscious doing this research. Like you don't have unlimited time on, or you don't have a team of 10 researchers. And I had to adapt at that time. So some interviews were shorter and I would have liked, and some stakeholders I couldn't access at all. The data wasn't always as clean or complete as the textbook will demand. And this is where the adaptation comes in. You work with what you have. You triangulate, you look for multiple independency sources pointing to the same pattern, then you pay attention to that. And when a signal is weak but persistent, you flag it, right? But you don't wait for the perfect data to name what you've seen. You start anyway. Because here's the thing, the organizational context, on corporate context. If you wait for the perfect data, you will never start. And if you never start, the system stays invisible. And if the system stays invisible, everyone keeps solving symptoms. And the hardest part is not the research or the analysis, are the politics. System thinking, by its nature, makes visible things that some people prefer to keep invisible. When you name a structural pattern like misaligned incentives or a broken feedback loop, you are saying this is not just a user experience problem. This is an organizational design problem. And that can feel threatening to people who own the current design, right? So how do you navigate that? we go through 3 tactics, even though we got a few escalations, to be honest. We led with empathy and not blame. When we were presenting the findings, I framed the system level patterns and not individual failures, right? Like nobody was the villain in that room. And the system was producing outcomes that nobody wanted. And that framing matters. It lets people engage without feeling attacked. Then, the second, I designed engagement carefully. I didn't just present a report and walk away. I created a working session where stakeholders could interact with the data. I brought quotes and asked people to cluster them to find their own patterns. And this was crucial because when people discover the systemic insights by themselves, at the end of the day, they own it. They feel related. Um, when you hand them to them in a slide, they can reject it, and they are behaving like a police officer looking for mistakes or looking for any incoherence. And the last one is something that I learned the hard way, was that I had to meet people where they were. Some stakeholders wanted the full system picture, okay, with all this information and with the iceberg model, the full version of that. And others wanted 3 bullet points and recommendations. I learned to have both ready. The deep version for the curious people and the translated version for the time pressed. And of course, there are nice parts in this story, like a moment when during one of the workshops, there was one leader that looked at the map pattern and saw the whole picture. And that wasn't because I saw them something new. They already knew all the individual pieces, right? They've been incorporated for 20 years, so they know everything, most of the stuff. And what I did was connect them. That's the power of systemic lens. Not new information, but new connections between existing information. That's the magic. And that moment is what you are working toward when you apply systems thinking in an organization. It's not a perfect map, not a comprehensive model, just enough clarity that people can see the whole and not just the part to make the best decisions. Because one of the, let's say, other wicked problems that there are in organizations is they work on silos, and doesn't matter what actions they bring, they will continue working silos. Maybe it's something behavioral. Now, so what actually came out of all this? First, the research produced a set of evidence-based insights that reshape how the initiative was framed. So we moved from fix the IT product catalog to address the structural conditions that produce a broken journey. You know, that sounds different. That gives you more context and more information about what is the challenge about. And it led to different kinds of recommendations, not just interface changes or process tweaks, but we were talking about governance, structural shifts in how roles are defined, how feedback loops work, and how trust is rebuilt within functions. So now you have the solutions. Did everything get implemented? That's another part of the story. No. We need to be real and honest. Some recommendations landed, some are in still motion. Some hit the wall of organizational inertia and political. What did change, and this is what really matters, is the conversations. Some people from the leadership team now use language about systemic patterns that they didn't use before. And they frame it, and the framing shift in some way, including our findings. And to be honest, in a large organization, shifting the frame is often the first and the most important step to increase the maturity about one topic. Now we are almost at the end of this presentation, and let me share these learnings in a nutshell. So you don't need permission to think systematically. You need permission to think systematically out loud, right? And that permission is earned through evidence and not theory, with data, with patterns, and with quotes from real people. Then later on, the framework comes. Once people are already curious. The second is adaptation is the method. I didn't follow the textbook. I just, borrowed from the iceberg model, from service blueprinting, from behavioral research, from stakeholder mapping, and I stitched them together in a way that fit the constraints I was working within. And if you are waiting for the perfect moment, you will never start. And the last one is the emotional dimension matters more than I expected. Because from my perspective, and this is my humble opinion, system thinking can feel cold, because all these diagrams and feedback loops. But the systems I was mapping were made of people who were tired, frustrated, and in any case, doing their best within a system that wasn't set up for them to succeed. Do I have regrets? Well, I will do some things differently next time if a project of this level will come up. So, two things. I will have started mapping the political landscape earlier, understanding who owns what, who feels threatened by what, who needs to be brought in early versus late. And that's not to the secondary to the research. That is part of the research. And in organization, the system includes the power dynamics. And if you don't map those, you are working with a complete picture, and maybe you can get an escalation. And second, I would have been bolder about involving stakeholders in the mapping process from the very beginning, not just in validation sessions. Okay, co-creation is harder than measure, but it produces ownership. And that ownership is what turns insights into actions. And I want to leave you with one last thought. System thinking is not a superpower, it's a practice. Like any practice, it starts imperfectly. It starts with the moment you look at the problem and think, hey, there is something underneath that I cannot see yet. And that's all what I did. I'm still learning how to do it better. So thank you.
Thank you so
I'm
much,
looking,
Tina.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Great presentation. So guys, you have a good time for a Q&A session with Daniel. I think you can share a question here on the chat. So how do you think about the underlying mental models and value structures within Nestlé, and how this will shape how systems thinking is actually applied and the impacts of that?
Okay, I see. I'm looking at the chat, and there is some context there. I need a little bit more context for that question.
Yeah, I can take it quickly. It's a
Yeah.
little bit just a quick, but I feel like if you are very successful, Daniel, and I think you probably are and will be, in an organization like Nestlé with 270,000 employees, that will mean probably there will be efficiency gain, lower costs. It's a good thing internally. That will mean that the output of Nestlé, their footprint, their the products that you create, that will maximize. And that's great, right? But then what are those effects actually going to mean? And I think that's where there is a tension may be created, that you have a responsibility, not just what we will work internally, but what is that effect on the world? And we're not going to go into, of course, the discussion on Nestle, but there's a lot to say there in terms of the track record. And I think that leaves the question, how do you handle that responsibility as a systems designer? Yeah, thanks.
Wow, that's a great question, and I've been trying to bring that part of the system mapping to a skill that we also take care of what's going on outside, but that's something difficult to bring up and super challenging coming from different, from the high level of the organizations. At the end of the day, for me, Nestlé, it's a place where I can learn and bring this mindset, but I'm not expecting that I will change this organization at all, because it's like it's been in around for a long time enough that it sounds like a Frankenstein, and this bringing this mindset is impossible. It's like a wicked problem itself. Every implementation, it takes like years to get, and also to change the mindset. So I think systems thinking, it should be applied in in the pro level with an organization. I don't know if I answered your questions right, Kim.
No, it's great. It's great. Thanks, you, Dan. It's a complex thing. So,
but
thank you. Yeah.
It's a complex question. But thank you so much for the question, Kim. It was really interesting.
We have another one from the Jean. Daniel, how do you figure out what people actually believe? No more context.
So honestly, I like to have, we have these official interviews one-to-one, but also I like to use this time to grab coffee with people at the office, and also doing that part of the job, like understanding what belief, what they feel aligned with the way they're doing work related to this project, okay? And if they have experienced anything. So in these informal catch-ups, you get more information than in these official interviews with people. So I just try to also keep this balance on using these official channels, but also these unofficial areas where I can extract more information and people feel more relaxed. So those are the beliefs. We also, on the belief side, we launched a survey, a global survey, around like 300 answers, where we validate these beliefs, that giving a scale 1 to 7, where 7 they fully agree and 1 they disagree. And we place these beliefs like IT, business doesn't understand IT, or IT doesn't understand business, or all these beliefs that we identify. And then we saw these patterns that more people were thinking like that, not only these specific people.
So thank you, Daniel. Another one is, when you present a reframed problem, how do people usually react? Maybe thinking in a context when organizational culture is not so collaborative, you need sometimes.
How people react. People don't listen. I think they're focused on, they want to deliver something quickly. They want to find the root cause. Well, not the root cause. They want to find the problem. What is the problem? Give me the problem. Oh, here's a potential application that we can bring in. And that's the way of working. It's quarterly agreements. They are focused on OKRs and they're focused on deliverables. That's something that you are fighting back with system thinking. And the good thing is creating these co-creation sessions where you have 2-3 hours. Say, okay, let's keep focus, and then you can bring it without mentioning it. So let's say like is the Troja horse in a way. Imagine that picture of bringing system thinking.
Okay, great. So I think we have time for the last one, maybe two. What approach did you use to map the political landscape?
Thank you for that question. That's something that we are still figuring out how to map the political. Now we are working in a project and we are trying to understand who should be involved. The answers that I got is like, well, it's a stakeholder map, but I believe it's not a stakeholder map because a stakeholder map is who should be informed, who should be aligned, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's who has the power to influence, and it's not maybe at sea level. It's a level below that it's more approachable and you can reach to that. I'm still figuring it out. There is not you know, a magic ingredient or magic instructions to get that. I think it's trial and try. It's an iteration of stakeholder mappings until you find the right way.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. I think the last one really. Follow up from what you said, you are on system thinking in a large organization. So do you use the system thinking in your own thinking and practice? And as in, do you use to think how you can influence the wider organization?
I use system thinking, my own thinking. Yes, I like to, you know, I have this type of cards, like where I write down my notes and I keep like some numbers and then I start connecting other type of information that can be related. So I create a system of knowledge in these cards. It's all school. I know that you have some tools available on internet, but I prefer pen and paper. And how you can influence the wider organization. I'm not, you know, there are like 5 people more above me. I think 5 or 4. It's super difficult. You need to be on the top, or you need to get along with the CIO, and then the CIO will create this trend of bringing system thinking because he starts saying system thinking, and then everyone starts saying system thinking. Right now, for example, the buzzword within the organization is end-to-end. So now people are looking at end-to-ends, and it's because last year they bring end-to-ends. The journey management, our team, were looking at end-to-ends in journey management, but now it's everyone is talking about end-to-end data experience, end-to-end the employee experiences.
So Homa is killing me, but I need to ask the last one. I swear this is the last one. How similar or different approach you think system thinking is from theory of change? It's the last one, I promise.
Quite a lot. I mean, you see the difference because on the books, on the textbooks, you have, the perfect conditions to apply systems thinking and the perfect ingredients to do it. But in the real life, you don't have all the conditions and you don't have all the data, or you have fragmented data. And then you need to, it's like a puzzle. You need to connect these pieces and then see if those pieces make sense and then validate those with the stakeholder. And you hit that wall that maybe this framing is wrong. And then you need to go back and say, okay, I hallucinated like AI. What can I do? What is the next step? What type of data I'm missing? What type of perspective of big picture I'm missing? So I think it's quite different from the textbook and the reality.
Okay. So thank you guys for all contributions. Thank you again, Daniel, for this wonderful presentation. We are
Thank
going
you.
to close our session. I will just share my screen. Oh, I'm able. Roma, if you could share the screen just to share quick informations about our paper. Yeah, we recently published the State of Systemic Design. It's an unofficial guide paper, so you can access the full version here on the link on the top. And you'd like to get some feedback for the session. So how useful, inspired, helpful this session it was for you today, guys. And feel free to suggest about more topics or speaker for upcoming events. Every feedback are very welcome.
Thank you so much, Dania, for sharing this amazing case study. I think I'm sure everybody enjoyed learning from these conversations. Really looking forward to having you again in one of our future events, Dania. Thank you, everybody, for joining again. Have a great rest of the day then.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.